the two of you guys working together. Where are you guys in terms of the build out and certainly the deals with the government? And I also think about here we now have the backdrop of the U.S. war in Iran and probably pressure, something we're going to talk about later in terms of the military stockpiles here in the U.S.
So with respect to the America's Gold and Silver joint venture, we fortunately already have the land. We already have the permits, which puts us several years ahead. We're doing engineering and construction plans now. We'll start probably in the next 60 days. So we hope to have that plant up and running by this time or summer next year.
This time or summer next year?
Yeah, so March to June.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a little while to get online.
Yeah, well, it just takes a year to build the construction. Okay. We're talking about a $75 million project. It's not a little rinky-dink addition.
I wonder about the conversations you continue to have with the U.S. government, and especially, again, going back to this backdrop. Are you guys constantly talking? Are they talking about where are you? You know, what does this mean in terms of U.S. national security? Because I do feel like we are increasingly having conversations, and even this week and over the last week and a half when it comes to what we're seeing in the energy markets, that even nations around the world are now thinking about, okay, what do we need to be energy efficient? So pick your critical commodity or resource that nations around the world are thinking about this.
Well, so two things have happened since I was here a month ago. Last week, we won a $27 million grant from the Department of War. We've been working on that for about 6 months. The purpose of that money is to reimburse us $20 million plus or minus for our facility in Thompson Falls, which we've been expanding since May. It goes live in 2 to 3 weeks. The other $7 million is for our operations up in Alaska. We have got antimony exploration going on there. So that was what that money is for. And then the week before, we announced a new resource report on another critical mineral that's very vital to the government called tungsten.
Yeah.
And tungsten's the second hardest mineral behind diamonds, and it's used for submarines and tanks, for shields. And we bought a property in Canada, Sudbury area, last May, and did enough work to be able to get what's called a third-party resource report that you can file with the SEC, and it shows $4.6 billion with a B of future revenues from that property. So we are on a fast track to get that up in operation. We hope to have it done this year.
Should investors expect more grants to come down the pipe?
I sure hope so, because we have a $45 million grant request in the Department of Energy today.
Okay.
We're doing a $75 million grant to the Department of War in 10 days. We're doing another $15 million grant to the Title III for our tungsten plant.
As CEO of the company, you have to plan for what revenue or money you will actually get when you plan these projects. What is your expectation that you will get those grants?
Actually, we run our company as if we're not going to get anything.
You do.
So you can't guarantee this.
So the base case is we're not getting any money.
We're not getting any money. I think what the government wants us to do is move faster, which is what the money really does. Because I have to go raise capital. I have to do lots of things to fund it myself.
Right.
If the government jumpstarts me, I can move 5 times faster than I would with my own money.
So Carol asked about discussions with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
What about just discussions with other parts of the U.S. government?
You guys are talking with the energy.
Yeah. Like, do you have a lobbyist in Washington? Do you have somebody full time for the company in Washington? How do those discussions work?
I hired a guy full time in D.C. About 2.5 months ago. He helped me get this final $27 million done. He's the one that filed the DOE grant for $45 million. He is constantly looking. You know, there's buckets of money in the government and all kinds of places that we don't know. And so we're trying to find out what they are. They don't necessarily communicate with one another. So it's a process. And then there's a system. I actually hired a former Department of War doctor who's helping us write the white paper. She knows what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So we're using all the tools we have available. As you know, General Jack King's on our board. He's given us some guidance. So I was spent last Thursday all day with Donald Trump Jr. in Dallas. We're doing everything we can to try to grease the skids so they know that we really are trying to help the country.
Gary, safe to say, and it's only been like a month since we talked last, that the pressure, I think you've already kind of mentioned this, that there is more pressure from the government to kind of get all this stuff up and running.
All you can do is listen to the news. When the news is saying we're running out of artillery, that's not something you really want to announce to the world.
Well, can you give us some clarity around that? Because I think we're trying to understand Is there pressure on U.S. military in terms of the build back? And I'm just wondering, now that we're in our second week of this conflict with Iran, is it causing stress on antimony or other critical mineral shipments? What are you seeing, and what can you tell us around that?
Well, we know there's a stockpile.
Okay.
And our job is really to build that stockpile further. But it's not just the United States. It's NATO countries. It's Australia.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out ways that we can put, like the hydromet facility with America's Gold and Silver, that's a different technology that we can take subpar antimony and make munitions grade material.
What's a munition, just for example purposes right now, what's a munition that includes antimony that's used in this war?
So what we'd make is a metal. It's a 50-pound ingot. It's serial stamped, put on a pallet, shrink wrapped, and shipped to the Department of War. They give that to Northland, Boeing, GM, whoever is making products that needs antimony.
So how long from when you send that shipment, that 50-pound shipment, does it end up in a munition that can be used in a war?
Within days.
That's how quickly they can produce it?
Well, no, they take that ingot and they'll distribute it to their subcontractors of the military.
But what I'm trying to understand,
all they do is melt it down.
But I'm trying to understand how long it takes the subcontractors to build those weapons.
I got no idea.
Yeah. We got to call Northrop on that one.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've asked Wayne too.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of clarity there.
Yeah.
And remember, World War II, we shut down all the auto factories and started making tanks and planes and trains and automobiles. So
we are not there right now.
No, we're not there.
Listen,
and you know, our goal is to try to be sure the government has these critical minerals in its fuselage. That's what they need.
I just have to say, I have a grandmother who was a Rosie the Riveter. So like she was at a GM plant. But the stress on antimony supplies now, are we seeing a drawdown here?
You know, they don't tell me. But I can tell you their orders continue to increase.
Okay.
So as of right now, to fulfill the Department of War's orders for 2026, is $85 million of orders I have.
Okay. So,
What does that compare to a year ago?
Zero.
Yeah. So it's pretty aggressive. Yeah. Hey, we were thinking about when you were coming in our planning meeting about President Trump's upcoming meeting with President Xi. The export controls remain kind of an issue between these two countries when it comes to these critical minerals and materials. Have you seen any indication that China is about to kind of loosen their export restrictions? You're shaking your head, of rare earth elements and permanent magnets in particular?
There's a difference between the rare earths and critical minerals.
Right.
When Trump met in
and I know we always do this when
people get them confused, and it's understandable. Trump came out of that with a 1-year reprieve on rare earths. He actually said critical minerals. The prime minister or the Ministry of China the next day said no critical minerals. So when tungsten and antimony were stopped, that was September of 24. That's before Trump was in office. That was during the Biden administration. Why did that happen? The largest antimony mine in the world, called Twinkle Star in China, depleted. 125-year-old mine, the largest in the world, done. Wow. So China has been, every day that I'm in the market trying to buy antimony, my only competitor is the People's Republic of China. And they're out there throwing money, roads, bridges, whatever they have to do to get that country to sell them antimony. And so I am their competitor in the market.
So what do you want President Trump to do?
We need floors. I mean, we're dealing with a gorilla that can drive the price down and lose money.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the country of China. So we need price floors to protect the industry.
Geographically, how is it distributed around the world?
As far as antimony, it's typically found with gold. We're currently receiving antimony from the country of Chad, Bolivia, Peru, Chile, Australia, Mexico. Now, every time you look at those antimony deposits in those countries, different grade, it may have arsenic, it may have sulfur, it may have lead. We have to deal with that in our smelters. So we prefer clean antimony.
Do you see anything, we go from administration to administration, and, China is a nation that's got these long-term plans, right? And they, as you said.
100-year plan.
Right, exactly. Very different. Just got about 30 seconds. Do you believe that what we are seeing now in these domestic builds of critical precious metals, rare earths, like all this stuff, that it will continue no matter who's next?
It's a wake-up call. We've been sitting behind the log for 20 years watching this happen, and all of a sudden it happened. And so it's a huge wake-up call, and this industry has the capability of meeting these needs. We need time and we need money, but it can be done.